Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile. The very name evokes images of a sensual, exotic queen. And for 2,000 years, we've been sold this Cleopatra, a devastatingly beautiful, ethnically Egyptian queen whose seductive powers brought the most powerful men in the Roman Republic to their knees. She is the ultimate femme fatale, a tragic heroine defined by romance, luxury, and a dramatic, but almost everything in that sentence is a lie. She wasn't ethnically Egyptian. She almost certainly wasn't the stunning supermodel from the movies, and her power came not from her body, but from a brilliant, multilingual mind that absolutely terrified the Roman elite. This is the story of how a brilliant political smear campaign created a 2,000-year-old lie, and the truth about the real last Pharaoh of Egypt. This is the Cleopatra we've all grown up with. You may know her from the movies, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, from Angelina Jolie in the Coen brothers' quirky comedy Asterix and Cleopatra, or from Gal Gadot as a surprisingly Amazonian Wonder Woman. But none of these portrayals are rooted in reality. The story of Cleopatra is the story of how the Romans conquered Egypt and how their propaganda machine crushed her memory forever. But it's also the story of how a brilliant, multifaceted woman was forgotten by history because she didn't fit into their story. The Romans needed a villainous queen to justify their conquest of Egypt, so they made one. But the real Cleopatra was far more complex, intelligent, and powerful than their wildest imaginations. To truly understand Cleopatra, we need to go back to the beginning, to her childhood. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC, most likely in the city of Alexandria, which had been Egypt's capital ever since Alexander the Great founded it 300 years earlier. Back then, it was the biggest city in the world. A bustling metropolis of over 500,000 people. It was home to scholars, scientists, and merchants from all across the known world. Its library was the center of the ancient world, where scholars flocked to read the latest texts from Greece, Rome, and beyond. Most importantly, though, it was the seat of the pharaoh's power, the capital of an independent kingdom that still punched well above its weight. Cleopatra's father was Ptolemy XII, the 11th king of Egypt from the Ptolemaic dynasty, a series of Greek rulers descended from Ptolemy, the first one of Alexander the Great's generals. When Alexander died, his generals fought to divide his empire, and Ptolemy seized Egypt for himself. Ever since, the Ptolemies had ruled Egypt with an iron fist, keeping their distance from their Egyptian subjects and maintaining a close relationship with the emerging Roman Republic. This meant that Cleopatra was raised speaking Greek, not Egyptian. Her mother tongue was not the language of her subjects, nor was she culturally Egyptian. She was the product of a royal court that spoke Greek gods and married within the family to keep the bloodline pure. But while she was born into this Greek dynasty, Cleopatra was determined to be more than just a product of her upbringing. She studied diligently, becoming fluent in at least 9 languages, including Egyptian. This was no idle pursuit. It was a tool of political genius. It allowed her to connect with her people in ways her ancestors never had. To hold court, negotiate peace treaties, and collect tribute, she had a connection that no foreigner could replicate. It was an asset her enemies tried to turn against her, claiming she used it to cast herself as an Egyptian queen, a dark temptress who lured Romans into worshiping strange foreign gods and abandoning Rome for the exotic East. But the truth was far simpler. Cleopatra simply wanted to connect with her people. It was also around this time that Cleopatra began amassing power. According to the Roman historian Plutarch, she spent hours in the royal archives, poring over ancient texts. She learned the science of chemistry, studying alchemy and developing her own cosmetics, perfumes, and ointments. In fact, legend says she was so fascinated by chemistry that she tested its limits, deliberately ingesting poisonous plants and herbs so she could study their effects. Whether that story is true or not, it paints a picture of a brilliant, ambitious mind. She was a scientist at heart, driven by the need to understand how the world worked. And it was that thirst for knowledge that would make her such a force for power. When she was 14, her father arranged for her to marry her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. and made them joint rulers of Egypt. But the siblings quickly grew to despise each other, and eventually, Ptolemy kicked Cleopatra out of the palace, taking their young son with him. Alone, exiled and bitter, Cleopatra regrouped, raising an army to take back the throne. She sought help from Rome, sending a letter begging the great general Julius Caesar for assistance. Now, this might seem like the plot of a Hollywood movie, a damsel in distress calling for help from a handsome prince. But remember, Cleopatra was no helpless seductress. She was a brilliant tactician who just suffered a temporary defeat. And Caesar, even though he was the most powerful man in Rome, desperately needed her support. Egypt controlled the crucial Eastern Mediterranean, and Caesar needed to secure its support before invading the rest of the Roman world. It was a match made in political heaven. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria, Cleopatra wasn't going to win any points for subtlety. She charmed and negotiated with the city's merchants to give her supplies and provisions for her army. Then she had them load her up in a chest and snuck past Ptolemy's guards to meet Caesar. Face to face, she wowed him with her intellect, fluency in Latin, and charm. And when Ptolemy finally realized who was hiding inside the crate, he was too scared to stop her. Caesar was officially on her side, and soon, thanks to her intimate knowledge of the region, she was back on the throne. Together, they produced a son. Unfortunately, their joy was short-lived. A group of senators in Rome murdered Caesar, plunging the Republic back into chaos and setting the stage for the rise of Octavian. Now, if you're familiar with Rome's legendary heroes, you might wonder why we haven't heard of Octavian. That's because he later changed his name to Augustus, officially ending the Roman Republic and establishing the Roman Empire. But back in the 1st century BC, he was a ruthless politician who craved power more than anything else. Like Cleopatra, he had an interest in Egypt. His great-uncle had died during Caesar's civil war, leaving Augustus and his sister Octavia as heirs to his fortune.